What's up, people? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be going through a squat day and a leg day. So first exercise I have up is a pause squat. I'm going to be working up to 2 singles, so one at 6 and one at 7. But before I add any weight to the bar, one thing I want to just go through, which is super important for having a really good squat setup and having a good squat session, is ensuring that you're setting up the rack at a proper height. So on these hammer strength racks, unlike with an EO rack or a LECO rack, where the increments of going up are much smaller, this one has a huge jump between heights. So when you're using a rack like this, which has a huge difference between rack heights, you should always go for the one that is a little bit too low and the one that's a little bit too high. So the ideal height to have the bar set up when you're about to unrack a squat is around kind of mid chest level, so above the nipple line but below the collarbone. Because one of the reasons for this is, like, when you think about what the bar is going to be on your back, especially if you're doing low bar squat, it's going to be positioned around this rear delt area. But when you are unracking the bar, you want to be able to unrack the bar and clear the rack by a decent amount of height. Because when you go for your actual squat, you do the squats, you do the set, and then as you're walking back in, it's easy to re-rack the bar. And you're also wasting very little energy on the unrack. Now what happens when you're using a rack height that's too high is I'll show you right now. So this rack height is literally only up one height, okay? Now you can see the difference between where it is positioned on myself compared to the last one. The last one was positioned closer to here, but this is pretty much at my throat. So if I'm gonna go try get into my usual low bar position, I'm gonna unrack myself, get myself underneath the bar, try to get it across my rear delts to the same position. I barely am able to clear the rack here, and now I almost have to be very careful as I'm unracking the bar not to clip off the rack itself. But then when I'm struggling at the end of the set and I come back in, I might have to calf raise back in. That's going to vary depending on what height you are. So it's always better off to have the rack height set just a little bit lower than a little bit too high. It's very common to see people calf raising the way out, be very unsteady with their walkout, and then have a shit squat. Because, like, one thing you have to keep in mind when it does come to the squat, if you have a strong unrack and a strong walkout, you're going to be way more stable when you're about to descend into the bottom, and you're going to be able to maintain a lot more rigidity through your torso if you don't have to worry about, okay, I'm able to calf raise this way out, and worrying about all these different things. But definitely make sure you're setting the rack height properly so you can have the best squats. So a very lowly 6 sets of squats today. So this is going to be my last set. 2 pause singles, 1 high bar set of 6, and then 3 sets of 8. And you can see I've been taking pretty modest slow drops from my top single. This is like 60 kilos down. Now naturally I'm doing more sets and more reps of this. However, one of the reasons we're using such a low weight is like just about 60% of my 1RM. And one of the reasons we're using this as backups is, as I mentioned in the previous video, is to prioritize bar speed. So you'll probably be able to see with this set, I never actually reach a point in the set where the bar speed slows down by much at all. And that will have been the exact same for the first set and the second set, because it's so low weight that I'm able to move at pretty much the exact same speed throughout and not get fatigued. And that's what we're trying to do. We're having that heavy load exposure, the top single, right? We're challenging my position there with the pause squat, challenging my position at depth, and then we're dropping a little bit load off the bar and prioritizing moving the bar as fast as we can. So one thing I'm really thinking about when we're dropping to the bottom of the squat and coming out is speed. Really thinking about driving my big toe through the floor, collapsing my arch, powering down through the inside of my foot, and getting up top as quick as possible. Right, so on to leg extension now, and when you're setting up for leg extension, the way to have this shin pad is as far up your leg as you possibly can. So ideally, you kind of want it almost like around kind of mid shin, because this is going to be the easiest point for you to have like the most advantage over this as it goes around the pivot point. If you have it too close to your ankle, you're increasing the lever arm, which is going to increase the amount of force you need to produce from your quads. So with this, I'm pretty much going to put this up all the way, and you kind of see as I'm getting into the machine itself, even though I have this up to full weight, I'm a pretty average fucking size human. This is still not even up close to this kind of midway point, it's just a little bit below. However, it's going to be much better for me to have it here than down here, where it's essentially on the inside of my ankle joint, which is going to be extremely uncomfortable as I get towards the heavier weights. So I've got 3 sets. I'm going to do 2 heavy sets, then 1 lighter back off, and then we're going to go into a leg press. And the reason I'm doing this before the leg press is when I'm doing a leg press, typically I got stronger adductors, I got stronger glutes. So I'm using this to pre-exhaust my quads beforehand. So when I do fail at the leg press, I'm going to fail at my quads. I'm not going to fail at the likes of the glutes and adductors, because today I'm really trying to focus on improving my quad development, because it's an area that is a little bit lagging. So I'm going to get into my first set here. I'm not even going to bother to do a warm up with the weightless machine because there's 0 point, I'm already warm. So if we're thinking about 2 good cues or 2 execution tips for likes of leg extension, 1 and 2 are both going to be related to stability. Okay, so you have great external stability here with the machine. You know, you have the nice seat here to sit into. You're able to brace yourself against the back pad as you kick out. But a lot of people won't use them properly. What you ideally want to do when you're using something like this leg extension is when you're seated into position, these handles here, you need to use them. Not to have your hands in your laps, kind of kicking out your legs, okay? Have your hands crossed like this. Like, you're not going to get the most out of leg extension by that, because first of all, you're not going to be able to put as much force, because as soon as I try to kick out here and I get towards the top, my arc's going to start to move forward. Right? I don't want that. I want this to keep in this flex position, because that's essentially the difference between using like a leg extension and just doing the squat, right? We're thinking about using a leg extension. We're thinking about training our FM. So our FM is head of the quad that's going to cross across your hip as well as at your knee. When you have a flex, it's going to be shortening here, but as you let the knee extend, we're going to flexion. It's going to be shortening here and lengthening here, right? Whereas if we go into this position where we're kicking out and then we let our hips come up, we're not actually allowing ourselves to kind of get any extra tension through that part of the quad. As well as it's going to be harder for us to output force. So what you want to do is when we're getting into the position here, you grip down on these handles, drive my hips into the seat, drive out, control on the way down. The second one is your foot position, okay? So what I do want to do with our foot position is we're not just kind of thinking about it there being like all kind of neutral and flaccid like a cock. We essentially want to have it kind of pointed up towards us. When we point our toe towards us, we're going to contract our gastroc, so our gastrocnemius, which is a calf muscle, but it helps to stabilize the knee. And as it stabilizes the knee, then when we're in this position and we're trying to kick out, then all we really have to think about is our quad pulling on this forward, so we're able to get the most out of this leg extension. So there's two things I'm really thinking about here. Toe pointed towards me, gripping down into the seat, kicking out against the pad. So final quad movement of the day is going to be a leg press. Now, I'm doing the leg press slightly differently to maybe you've seen it done before. So essentially what I'm doing with my foot placement here is I'm going pretty much all the way down to the bottom, but just having the ball of my foot on the platform. Now, the big reason for this is that if I go in this kind of mid stance, okay, if I go here and I'm going to bring my knee towards my chest, that's the most range of motion I have there, right? Whereas I'm trying to get a good degree of knee flexion, right? Look at this, as I bring my knee off the platform, get full on knee flexion here. So if I go here, I'm able to get a little bit more, as this is going to push me into it as well as I'm going to get a little bit of my arse lifting off the pad. Now, once I'm under control here, it's not much of an issue, because you'll see when I'm going through my reps, I'm going through them very slow. I'm going with very slow tempo, and I'm never really going to get myself into an extremely rounded position with my lower back. But I'm getting a ton of knee flexion, I'm getting a ton of quad stimulus. So I'm going to go into my second warm set and see what I'm on about. One thing I'm clearly big on, because I do both bodybuilding and powerlifting, is like making sure that you're pushing the accessories like to your limit, right? Now, this is once you are not doing it to the detriment of your recovery. So when I talk about recovery, I mean your ability to maintain or progress in your following sessions. So if you're noticing that you're pushing things so hard that you are decreasing your performance session to session, you need to kind of scale either back to intensity or the overall kind of volume of primarily your accessories first before you touch anything like your competition work. When I'm thinking about my rep ranges that I'm going to use for my accessories, rep ranges are essentially intensity zones, right? Because you're not going to do 12 reps with 90% load, right? You're probably going to do maybe 3 to 5 reps with something like that. So when we're looking at these rep ranges, we're thinking about what type of intensity range are we going to be in at the moment. So I'm utilizing anything from 8 or more. So maybe an 8 to 15 rep range for my accessories. So this is kind of twofold. It's not going to be so light that I'm going to give up because the pain is so sore. Because sometimes that's something that will happen when people use their rep range is too high, is they're not actually hitting failure through their muscle capacity. They're maybe just like running out of breath, and maybe the pain is just too much for them to get through. But if you get anything that's like heavier than an 8, well, we have to kind of keep in mind how much heavy loading we're doing on our competition movements for the week. Like our squat, bench, deadlifts, they're going to be causing a lot of kind of disruption to not just our muscular system, but our nervous system as well as our connective tissue. So if we are doing that as well as in our accessories, when maybe the goal is not necessarily to improve our connective tissue strength or to improve our overall strength output on the like of an accessory work. Accessory work is primarily there to improve other qualities, like improve muscular adaptations. So why do you use something that's like sub 8, which could have these higher recovery needs, like the likes of doing a fucking set of 5 on leg press? Completely unnecessary. Use that for your squats. On these, use something that's going to be a little bit more moderate. You're going to be able to allow yourself to lower it to a sufficient degree that you're going to challenge the muscle, but not so much that you're going to be failing by virtue of your cardiovascular capacity or your pain tolerance. So there's absolutely nothing exciting to say about doing adductors, to be honest. So I just want to talk a little bit about like the current state of the bulk. So at the moment, 97 kilos, so about 3 kilos off like the 100. However, you know, one thing that you don't want to do when you're trying to go through a bucket phase is chase the body weight, right? The body weight you want to happen as a result of course, like the calorie surplus being sufficient, but as well as your training being sufficient, right? When we're looking at increasing muscle mass, it does not necessarily correlate to you gain 1 kilo, you automatically gain X amount of muscle. Only a certain percentage of it could be muscle. However, there's lots of people out there who gain kilo and kilo after a year, but they don't gain muscle mass because they're not doing training or their training isn't sufficient, okay? So if we're having too fast of a rate of gain, especially as you get more advanced, there's going to be greater propensity of it to be muscle mass. So at the moment, I'm 97 kilos, training's gone phenomenal, and the kind of plan with the body weight is to not necessarily push it like to 98 as soon as possible or to 99 as soon as possible. It's essentially kind of sit here for a while, maybe like the next 2 months or so. I'm going to pretty much be hovering around the high 96s to the low 97s and just allow training to take place and see what type of body composition changes as well take place, right? Because I'm at the point where I know if I gain 3 kilos in the next like 3 months, it's a lot of it, the majority of it is probably going to be body fat. Whereas at the moment, if I just make the most of how training's gone at 97 kilos, which has gone phenomenal, the likelihood is in the next 2 months, probably see that 97 kilos look a little bit different, or at least by the time I get to 98, I'll have that 98 with a little bit more muscle mass than I should have. So when you're going through your gain phase, don't chase the scale weight, chase your training progressions. That's going to be how you're going to see the muscle mass come on. It's not for chasing scales. The scales is like a nice proxy for, we're training in the right direction. However, if that's not being met with performance increase over time, then you're kind of wasting your time and you're kind of spinning your wheels and you're probably just adding fat. So I'm on to my final exercise of the day, and I found out an absolutely unbelievable hack for making sure that your bench height is correct when you're going into commercial gym. So all the other bench heights in here are to like far too low to the ground. So I have to essentially kind of shimmy my own one here using adjustable plates. Now, one of these is in around the same height as a competition bench. So what you need to do is set this up against your benches in your gym and see if the bumper plate is in around the same height. If it's around the same height, then you know you have a comp spec height bench. If not, you just adjust with some plates until you get the desired effect. So pretty handy hack. So final movement of the day is a squat press. So while the rest of the workout is pretty much just my legs, I am still keeping a bench frequency in today because I'm benching 4 days a week. Now, today is a lower intensity bench day, and I'm using a squat press, which is variation, which is essentially kind of challenging an area where I'm going to be weakest within my bench. I'm typically going to have my bar speed so down the most, kind of through the mid-range, and that's essentially where I'm bringing the bar down to, right? I'm not going all the way down to chest because I'm quite strong off the chest. Our bar speed is so down just as I come off it. And that's one of the reasons we're kind of using this, is to expose me to this position a little bit more. But we're using some light RPE, real snappy work to help prime me for tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be my heaviest bench day of the week. So one of the ways that we need to think about training is like, we don't necessarily always have to be training every single movement as hard as possible all the time. Some of our days can simply just to be allowed to have good performance on the days that matter. So tomorrow's the day that matters for my bench press. Today, not so much. So with that, I'm again trying to think about my technique during this movement. I'm not necessarily trying to think about moving the most amount of weight possible. I'm trying to think about how can I move this weight as best I can with the best execution, and thinking about the areas within my bench press that I suck at, okay? So what's that for me? It's definitely extending my triceps. It's allowing myself to maintain position through the areas where I'm gonna have the bar speed on the most. And that's essentially what we're doing here. So again, priming the movement pattern, having me think about my technique, reinforce the technique for tomorrow, which is going to be the day that matters. And I'll know if I select the right intensity week to week because I need tomorrow to improve. And if tomorrow doesn't improve, it could be a case that, well, maybe I'm just not as strong on that day, but as well, it could also be the fact that maybe I'm pushing this too hard. So that's one thing you actually need to keep an eye out for within your training week. If you notice that your primary days are not moving, but other days are, maybe you're training the other days too hard, and then your performance is decreased for your primary days. And that's not what you want, right? You want the primary squat day, the primary bench day, the primary deadlift day, you want that to be going up. But if the other days are going up and the primary deadlift day is not, well then you're doing something wrong. You're probably pushing a little bit too hard. So again, it could be your accessories, it could be your secondary days that you're pushing a little bit too hard, maybe you're under recovering, but ultimately that is your benchmark for success of your training program, your training week, your training volume, and the intensity that you use on the program. Anyway, that pretty much wraps up today's vlog. Like the rest, I'm pretty much all over the place of just random informational bits, but anyway, we'll keep them coming because we gotta keep up the consistency. Alright, babe? Yes. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video, do make sure to obviously like the fucking video. If you do not like them regularly, start liking them, and of course, subscribe for more content.